Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. As Europe sinks deeper into crisis, it's time for a novel approach to the economy. So argues my guest in today's programme. Tomas Sedlacek has been hailed as one of the top economic thinkers of our time. At the age of 24, he was made advisor to Czech President Václav Havel. He was a fellow at Yale University before becoming a consultant for a major bank in Prague. He's just published Economics of Good and Evil, in which he asks a simple question: what is economics and who is it for? Tomas Sedlacek, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
Europe might see years, perhaps decades, with no growth. What do you think is going to be the psychological tipping point for Europeans to accept that?
Yes, I think it's more than a crisis of capitalism. What it really is a crisis of growth capitalism. We got so used to the thing being everything is easier, of course, with growth. Everything is easier when, you're getting free beers sort of all the time. And, the way I believe it is that, democratic market capitalism, if you want, is a fertile ground for growth. But what we've experienced psychologically, and psychologically only, is a subject-object reversal, where now today it is growth has become a conditio sine qua non of market democracy, if you will. So if we are deprived of growth, we feel that the markets will go down, we feel that the whole, even democracy, you hear this many times in between the lines, will go down. And, we should expect, to quote the book of Job, shall we only expect the good from the hands of the market, so to speak.
And it's interesting you point out that growth is a relatively recent obsession in civilizational history.
Yes, we did not measure GDP for 92% of our existence here in this recorded history, and it wasn't really important, whether I'm 3.4% happier on GDP per capita than last year. And if I was to ask you if your personal GDP went up or down 2011 to 2012, most people don't care, even though it's a very easy thing for you to find out. But when it becomes a GDP, it becomes sort of a religious sort of a thing that we pray to.
It's an interesting point that GDP is now, GDP growth seems to be a secular version of the old religious idea of paradise, but Europe is no longer a religious society.
Yes, we have swapped. You cannot enter a belief vacuum or trust vacuum. You always believe something. So we have swapped in many respects this religious belief of some sort of paradise. We've put that paradise on earth, and the guide to that, the priests showing the way, are the economists. Those are the markets. This is the unorchestrated orchestrator. I'm saying this, of course, with irony, tongue-in-cheek. We don't want to guide it. You mustn't tell it what to do, laissez-faire, laissez-passer. It will tell you. So economics has become, like religion, normative backwards. You cannot really voice your opinion. It will voice its sort of life of its own, logic of its own, the logic of the markets on you. So it's become an imperative even of ethical nature.
So we don't want it we want it to tell us, like a priest, what's going to happen.
Yes.
And at the same time, we don't like it when it does something that we don't want. So why do people accept that paradox, or perhaps they don't accept it?
Yeah, it's when you take let's have a look in my book. I try to look into the old myths and also the new myths. Economics is one of them, but also Matrix and horrors. Those are myths that we Solus once defined myth as something that never happened, but it's happening always. So this is sort of the model of Homo economicus. You've never really met a Homo economicus, but then again, everybody is one. It's so in this way, that's what's happening.
And you talk a lot about this, these manifestations of Homo economicus in popular culture. It's with us everywhere. When you watch a film like The Matrix, you're made to feel that there is this inexorable progress somehow.
Yeah, you have this also, and this is the warning that you read many times in art, being popular art like Matrix or ancient art, is this subject-object reversal. In the beginning, this is the plot of Matrix. We human beings created artificial intelligence in order to serve us and to slave for us and to work in our stead. Subject-object reversal. We human beings have become slaves of machines. You can see this in Lord of the Rings, you know, where the ring looks like it was made to serve Mordor, but then, of course, at the end of the trilogy, we read that if you destroy this one small little thing called the ring, whole Mordor lays flat. I think, or I claim, that today we have done this with economics. We fetishized it. It was supposed to serve us. You know, in the original Greek, which is interesting now with the Greek crisis, in the New Testament Greek, the word for debt and sin is the same word. Also in Latin, you know, dimini nos debita nostra, diminish our debits. It's also true in modern German. So our debts, a little bit like sins, have, you know, we did a little bit there and here, but then it took over, and now we have become effectively slaves of debt. We must do exactly what the markets, what debt wants us to do.
And we want the priests to deliver us from this sin, from this debt. And those priests are economists. Now, for you, if they're not really priests, or, I mean, what should they be?
You know, economists should be maintenance people. We have to, and this I think is the task of our time. Before European Union, you know, we had the idea of fetishization of the idea of a nation state. Now, there's nothing wrong with nation states, but if you fetishize it, you again see subject-object reversal. In the beginning, it looks like, you know, you can never be a true Czech unless you have your own nation. So the nation will make you complete, but subject-object reversal, you have to do everything for your nation, including laying down your life. So European Union defetishized, that's the role of EU, sort of to defetishize the idea of a nation state. And we have, you know, we wanted to make trade, not war, you know, to sort of paraphrase the hippie statement. So we have peace. That's a stationary thing. So, but we trade, but we want more of it. So while we have peace, and once you have peace, you cannot have more of it, we've traded, so to speak, geographical expansionism in Europe for economical one. And it's better, of course, than the geographical one. But I think the role of this generation is exactly to defetishize the economical, say, fine, we are affluent enough, let's make sure that we are justly affluent, and let's try and grow in other areas as well, because you can't really feed the Fed, so to speak. And there is only some level of economic growth that you can enjoy, and then it becomes somewhat unpleasant.
So we've defetishized the nation state in Europe, in the European Union. If we succeed in defetishizing economics as this sort of, you know, priestly idea, what are we going to be left with in the European Union?
Arts, culture, literature, relationships, all these things that I think, or rest. This is another thing. I think of all the 10 commandments, if I'm to take those, the most broken one is the commandment of Shabbat. You know, we are a very, very affluent society, yet we cannot rest. And one way how to read the crisis is that the technology is tired, nature is tired, we've driven it too hard, too much. Human beings are too tired. We need a rest. And one way how to read the crisis, it was sort of a forced Shabbat. We didn't want it, but and we have to bear that rest equally. That means not just a part of society that gets unemployed gets to rest maybe more than they need to, but we should, all of us, do that.
In this restful scenario, are economists out of a job?
No, it's like, you know, when you're building a house, you need an architect that you know, gives it a soul in some respect. Once the building is done, and you know, we have to ask the question, what sort of a building are we building? Isn't it already done? Then you don't need architects anymore. You need maintenance people, and that's, I think, is the role of economists. You know, if you fetishize it, if you think, you know, this is a nice thing about fetish. Fetish is something that promises you the road to bliss, salvation, heaven on earth, completion of your own complicated psychological self, but at the same time, it blocks it. You know, what led us into the crisis? Economics. What will lead us out of it? Well, even more economics. What led us into the crisis was too much consumption on debt. Well, what's the biggest wisdom of our age? What will lead us out of it? Well, even more consumption on debt.
So clearly it would be madness, almost an Einstein's definition of madness, of doing the same thing, expecting different results. It would be madness to get economists to lead us out of this. So who should lead us out of this? Because in Europe we have a massive disconnect between politics and people. There's a strong anti-politics sentiment in Europe. So who's going to lead us out?
And there's also a huge disconnect between economics and other sciences. And to a certain degree, we built that intentionally. We built the sort of frontiers of separation of mathematics. So, you know, if you don't understand mathematics, you cannot talk. This book is really exactly, there's not a single number in it. I'm trying to breach as well as I could exactly the borders between economics, philosophy, psychology, sociology, religion, myth, and anthropology. So, you know, otherwise, and I think this is also one way to read this, we have become, this is a beautiful word in German, a society of Fachidioten, you know, expert idiots. We all understand a small little part of a society. We all know that it's just a small bit, but we don't know how to sort of connect it back because we don't want to give up all that, you know, these technical details that we so fell in love with. So not only is the divide political, but it's also, let's say, scientific or knowledge. There is a huge divide between arts and technicalities or spirituality. And if you divide the soul from the body, you don't get one scary element, which is zombie, but you get two. The other one is a ghost that doesn't attack you, but blames, stares, and drives you crazy. This, I think, is a situation in which we are.
In 20 seconds or less, do you think you'll see Homo economicus die in your lifetime?
It definitely, we realize that it's a myth, that we've created that myth ourselves. It was a random invention. We could have also assumed that human people like yellow color, but we've assumed that they're rational, egoist, selfish. I think he's dying away slowly, and we are now understanding that human being is it's a wrong reduction of a man.
Thank you very much for your ideas. Thanks to Tomas Sedlacek, author of Economics of Good and Evil. And that's all for this edition of the interview on France 24. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.